Hi guys, I'm Rhoda and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I make videos on personal development, community and the world. And today we'll be talking about how to succeed at the workplace. Now, the tips or perspectives that I'm going to share with you, the ways in which we can succeed in the workplace that I'm going to share with you are not specific to any kind of industry or any kind of workplace. These will be applicable whether you work in a corporate, whether you have your own business, or whether you work in an NGO. I call them perspectives more than I call them tips, just because these are life-changing perspectives that will make you really think about who you are in your workplace, what you actually have to do or what you should be doing, and how you're going to eventually succeed. These are things that I have learned through my own experiences, by observing people I work with, by reading a lot of books, by learning from the people who have gone before me. All of our versions of success look a little bit different, but if you're someone who wants to stand out at whatever you do, if you're someone who wants to become an expert at whatever you do, if you're someone who wants to be the go-to person in your office, then this is the video for you. The first way to stand out, the first way to actually begin the process of success is by being a linchpin and not a cog. Now, if you're not familiar with the usage of these words were popularized by Seth Godin in his book Linchpin, and I'll link that book down below. But that book talks about how you have to be a linchpin versus a cog. Now, I'm not an engineer, so I'll try to explain this as best as possible. A cog is a part of machinery, and it is either a wheel or a bar, and it has spokes on it, and there are multiple cogs put together, and they kind of make each other move. So they set things in motion, and you would have seen this in any kind of machinery that you would have opened, maybe in a watch or in a clock or things like that. Every machine that runs has some version of a cog in it, and there are many cogs put together to make things work. And what's a linchpin? A linchpin is a pin that actually goes into the axle of a car to hold the wheel in place. So what the author Seth Godin says is that if you look at a cog, there are multiple cogs, they're replaceable. They don't have much value in themselves because there are many of them. So if one cog gets damaged or stops working, you can just replace it with another similar looking cog and the machine starts working again. On the other hand, a linchpin is very important for a car because it holds together the wheel, and if something happens to the linchpin, if it comes off, then the entire vehicle collapses, the axle collapses, the wheel comes off and the vehicle collapses. So it's much more valuable than a cog. And what the author tries to say is that we as people need to see whether we're a linchpin or a cog. Cogs are people who are very similar to others around them. There's nothing really unique about them. They only do what they are told to do. They don't do anything extra. They just perform their duties that they think are their duties, and that's it. They're very narrow-minded. They don't do anything beyond that. And they're replaceable. They don't have much value. And the linchpins are people who are very unique in the value that they provide. They do more than what is asked of them. They take initiative, they're responsible, they add value to whatever they do. And because of that, they are hard to replace. That's something to think about. Are we linchpins or are we cogs? Because it's very easy to be a cog. We just come to work, we do what is asked of us, and we leave for the day. We don't do anything extra, we don't take initiative, we don't take responsibility. We believe that others will take care of things. I just need to come, do my duty, and go home. That's it. And if we do that, we're obviously not going to succeed because we're just getting by with the bare minimum. On the other hand, if we are a linchpin, we will take initiative in things, we will take responsibility, we will take ownership of all the tasks that we have to do, and sometimes even do things that were not asked of us just because we see that something needs to be done. In an organization, in an NGO, in any group or community, the people who are linchpins are more valued. The people who are linchpins succeed faster. The people who are linchpins grow at a higher rate just because they're trying to provide value to whatever that they do. They give their heart to everything that they do. And one of the things that I notice in workplaces is that most people say, that's not my job. and that's their downfall. Because the moment you say that's not my job, you are giving up on an opportunity, you're giving up on a learning, you're giving up on something that can add value to your life. But sadly, a lot of us have that mentality. A lot of us think that if we go above and beyond, then we'll always be expected to go above and beyond. If we work harder, we'll always be expected to work hard. If we do more, we'll always be expected to do more. But in my mind, if I think about it, doing more helps me learn. Doing more adds value to my life. Doing more gives me more opportunities. So if I want to succeed, I obviously have to do more. The minute we put ourselves into this box and say, I'm not going to move out of that box, we are compartmentalizing ourselves, we are reducing ourselves, we are making ourselves get stuck. Because that's what's going to happen. If we only do what is expected of us, the minute there is a new opportunity, the minute there's a promotion to be given, the minute where there's a new role that's coming up, nobody's going to think about us. Nobody's going to think about the person who's just doing the bare minimum to get by, and sometimes not even that. There was this colleague of mine who was in a particular role of an office assistant. If you think about it, the job description of office assistant might be very limited, right? But he did that job really well. He didn't only do that job really well, but he went above and beyond, doing much more than any office assistant would be expected to do. He just did it because he got the opportunity. He saw things that needed to be done and he did it. And he did it with all his heart. He didn't do it out of compulsion. He didn't do it thinking that this is what they expect of me. He did it just because he wanted to learn, he enjoyed the opportunity that was given to him, and he did that well. And then there was an opening in another department, a completely different department, and that required a person with certain different qualifications, different experience than him. But because he took that time to do more than what was expected of him, because he took that time to go above and beyond what his job actually was, immediately two different people within the organization thought of him for that position. And then he got that job. And that's the job he's doing now. And even now, I think he does more than what is really expected of him. I think if you work with me, you know who I'm talking about. So these are people who don't think twice before staying late. They don't think twice before doing that extra thing that might actually be someone else's job. They don't think twice before lending a hand when hands are needed. They just do it, and they do it with all their heart, and they learn through that process, because whenever we do something new, we're learning something new. And the minute we do that with an open mind, the minute we do that with an open heart, we're actually adding value to our own lives. But we're also then adding value to the workplace that we're in, to the organization that we're in, and to our team that we're working with. That's when we become a linchpin, and that's how we succeed, because that's how we stand out. Nobody in successful positions has done just what is expected of them. And that brings me to my second point, which is set high standards and try to reach them. Oftentimes, as employees of an organization, as members of a team, our standards are based on the standards of the people around us. What that does is that lowers our standards a little bit, because if we have a superior who doesn't really care about certain things and only cares about finally getting this particular thing done, then we are only holding on to what that person cares about, and everything else that can actually develop us goes to the side of the road. If we base our standards on our team members and think that, oh, they're making mistakes as well, I'm human, I can make mistakes too, and then we hold ourselves to those standards, and then we don't actually learn to better ourselves, then we don't actually learn how to overcome our mistakes, how to overcome our shortcomings, and that's obviously going to be our downfall. So I believe that we should have our own standards, and those standards need to be high, because unless we keep our standards here, we're not even going to be able to reach here. Most of the time we keep our standards here, and so we're here, and that's something that's not going to help us succeed. I believe needs to be set for even really basic things, like even accuracy. is something that many of us don't aim for, because we think that somebody is going to check our work, that somebody is going to review our work, somebody is going to proofread our work, and so we ourselves don't need to be accurate just because we're human, things happen. But when we don't have those high standards, when we don't have the standard that I need to be 100% accurate, we don't even try. We don't even try like 30% most of the time. And we expect the other person to point out our mistakes or to correct our mistakes. And more often than not, the other person has to actually finally do the correction and finalize the work just because it's faster to do it that way, and your job's done. Or so you think. But that's going to lead you to a place where you're not growing, you're not developing, you're not actually going to be seen as a person who can succeed, because even the small basic things are not accurate. And let me tell you a story of someone who, again, is a colleague of mine, and he is like 100% accurate. Like, he does every single thing accurately. There has never been a mistake that he has made, because he checks everything so many times. We can trust him with anything, and we know that anything that he does is going to be correct. And he was asked this question, like, how are you 100% accurate all the time? Like, how is it possible? That you're human, right? And the answer he gave was very profound. And he said that I make sure that my work is correct just because I don't want to inconvenience the next person. And that statement of his is so profound, because half of the time we don't even think about this. We don't even think about the time that goes in corrections, the time that goes in proofreading, the time that goes in checking. And we just do our job, don't even check it sometimes, and send it to the next person thinking that my duty is done. I've done my job, I'm going home, goodbye. But we don't realize that the next person has to check it, and the minute they realize that you're not as accurate as you should be, or you're not given so much thought into what you're doing, they have to take that extra effort every single time that you give them something that you've done. They have to check every single time, and that's a waste of time. And the next time somebody wants to give someone a promotion, they're not going to think about you. They're not going to think about that person who has wasted so many hours of their life just because they had to check their work. They're going to think about someone who has actually made their life more easier, who has actually added value to their life, who actually was the linchpin and not the carve. So these are just basic things. Like, look at what you do, look at what standards you can set for yourself. Don't expect other people to set those standards. Don't expect your boss to set those standards. Don't expect your organization to set those standards. Set your own standards, and they should be high so that you can actually reach them and become the person you want to be. The next way that you can succeed is by having a abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mentality. Now, what that means is, most of us think that there are only limited spaces in this world, only limited seats, only limited positions. Everything is limited in our minds, and I don't blame you for having this mentality right from our childhood. Like, even if I think about it, getting into a school, getting into college, everything is based on limits. There are only these many seats, and there are quotas in those seats as well, and you have to fit into one of those quotas. Otherwise, you might not get a seat. And so we have this thinking inbuilt in us that's just limited, limited, limited. And because of that, we are so afraid of sharing ourselves. We are so afraid of sharing what we learn. We are so afraid of sharing the good things because we feel that we will run out. That's the scarcity mentality. On the other hand, having an abundance mentality is having the thought that it doesn't matter how much I share. The more I share, the more I'll have to share. The more I share my learnings, the more I learn, the more others learn, the more we grow together. And that mentality is very important in the workplace, because I see a lot of scarcity mentality in the workplace. I see a lot of ego that comes out of the scarcity mentality. I see a lot of politics that comes out of the scarcity mentality. I see a lot of competition, unnecessary competition, that comes out of the scarcity mentality. The minute we think that we are competing with the person sitting next to us, we try to do everything in our control to succeed, and not only succeed but push the other person down. And that's where all the issues, interpersonal issues in the organization come from, is from this belief that if I don't succeed, somebody else will. Or if I help the other person to succeed, I'm not going to succeed. And that fear is what is keeping all of us down. That fear is what is keeping us from being a linchpin, and it is pushing us to be a cog just because we're afraid. We're afraid of not succeeding. We're afraid of losing out on an opportunity. But what I've learned is, if we believe that there are opportunities abundant, available for people, and we behave in that way, we behave as if there is abundance in this world, then we will get what we need to get, because there's a time for everything. There's a time for us to succeed to the next role, there's a time for us to get that promotion, there's a time for us to get that opportunity that we're looking for. There's a time for everything. But the minute we start fearing, that's when we start behaving in ways that stop us from actually being able to succeed. We start competing with people, we start fighting with people, we start putting people down, we start playing the blame game. We point out each other's mistakes just for the sake of pointing out each other's mistakes. And in that process, a lot of our energy gets drained, a lot of our mind space goes off, and all the things that we can actually do to succeed is placed on the back burner just because our main aim is not to succeed but to not let the other person succeed. So my advice to you would be to cultivate that abundance mentality in your mind, to start thinking that there is enough for everybody. I know of a person who worked until very recently with us, and she and another colleague were two people in the same department. They were the only two people in that department. She very quietly used to help the other person with their English language skills. And if she had that scarcity mentality, she would think that if I teach this person English, obviously she had better control of the language at that time. And she could have thought that that's my edge. I know English well, I can communicate well, especially with an international clientele. And if I share my knowledge of English with this person, then they can overtake me in the department. But she didn't think that. She didn't think that just because she was sharing her knowledge that they're going to overtake her. She thought about them growing together, the department growing. And that for me showed her maturity. That for me showed her leadership. And that made me realize that she was a linchpin and not a cog, because she was willing to help the other person and not only think selfishly just about herself. And that made her a linchpin. And obviously, she's now not working in our company anymore, but I know that wherever she'll be successful because she's not selfish. She's not just thinking about herself. She's not thinking in the scarcity mentality. She's thinking very abundantly. She's thinking about let's grow together, let's reach greater heights together, and that's what our life should be about. The people I've seen who succeed are never thinking only about their success. They're thinking about success as an organization, success as a department, as a team, as a community. They're not selfish human beings. They can't be. The minute they get into that scarcity mentality, they're going to find it harder to succeed, because every step is a struggle. Every person is an enemy, and that's going to take the life out of them. And the last way to succeed, and the most important I would say, is to do the inner work. Any change begins from within us. And many times we forget about that. Many times we're so worried about our appearance, not only how we look, but how we are perceived by others, that we forget about who we actually are. I've had countless conversations with people who are worried about what other people think about them. And that's natural and that's human, but I also think that distracts us from actually figuring out who we truly are inside and actually working on that. And that's why it's called inner work, because who we are is not something that is set in stone. If you're someone who says that this is me, this is how I'm going to be, and I can't change myself, then I don't know what to say to you, because I am completely against that belief. I believe that as humans, we have the ability to evolve, we have the ability to grow, and especially internally. That's where the majority of our growth has to happen. It has to begin internally, it cannot begin externally. So we can't start with how do people see us, or how do people perceive us, or how do we come off as individuals, but we have to start as who are we when no one's looking? Who are we when nobody can hear what we're saying? What are our thoughts like? What is our inner dialogue? That's who we truly are. And if we want to change who we are, we need to start with those things. Are you someone who has taken the time to understand who you are, understand what is it that makes you behave in a certain way? Are you someone who's reflecting on your thoughts, reflecting on your actions of the day, reflecting of your behavior in the workplace? Or are you someone who just reacts to the situation at hand and is done with it? Because if you are that way, I think the best way to start this whole process of growth and evolution is to start with just reflecting on your day, just reflecting on what happened. Was there anything that I could have done differently? Was there any way in which I could have reacted differently? Could I have been less defensive? Could I have been more receptive of feedback? Could I have been silent in that time? Could I have been more firm during that conversation? All these things, just reflecting on it and course correcting ourselves, allows us to change our behavior the next time we're faced with the same situation. And especially in the workplace, we are working with people. We are working with people with emotions, and more often than not, those emotions are what make or break a lot of things. And knowing how to handle ourselves in those situations, teaching ourselves how to handle those situations, that's going to make or break who we are as individuals as well. The people who are successful don't come out of the womb successful. They build themselves to be successful. They course correct so many times in their life to reach the place they want to be. Life doesn't happen with no effort from anybody. We have to actually take the effort. If we want to get that promotion, we have to make ourselves worthy of that promotion. So there's no use blaming our boss or blaming the organization. Are we in the state where we can say that yes, I do believe that I actually deserve this promotion? And stop comparing with others. I think that's the biggest thing that you can do to stop your growth. Stop comparing, because most of the time we look at, as I said, our standards at other people, and we look at other people and we say that person's a leader, that person leads a team of 20, and these are their weaknesses. And look at me, I don't even have a team of my own, and I don't have those weaknesses. So why can't I get that leadership role? And that's not your comparison, because that person is not the standard. Standard has to be something that you set for yourself and based on criteria that is actually worthy of that position. So you can't see another person and compare yourself and say, oh, I'm better, so why don't I get the job? You have to see, okay, this is the standard for this particular position or this particular role. Am I here? Because if I'm not, I need to get here. And that's where inner work comes in. All of us want to be successful. All of us want to stand out at our workplaces. We want to have that edge above everybody else that makes people look at you and say, I want to be that person. I want to be like that person. And if you want to do that, you need to start with yourself. Just these 4 things in itself can change your life, can save your life, can save your career, because you can apply this to any career in this world. So if this is something that you desire, and I think all of us desire that, we want to be successful in whatever we do, we want to be recognized for whatever we do, then we just need to take these 4 ways to succeed and apply it to our lives, and I can guarantee it that your lives are going to change. So thank you for your time. I hope this video was useful for you, and I'll see you next week.